Alright people, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell notification. That way you'll know when I upload the next video and you'll be supporting my channel. Follow me on Twitter. Every time I upload a new video, I'll be tweeting. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Top 10 Misconceptions About World War I, the Great War Special by the channel of The Great War. We thought about a list of misconceptions about World War I that doesn't want to die even 100 years later. Yeah, I don't know. I think, World War I is not as famous as World War II nowadays, especially. Because World War II had, like I said, like always, one singular enemy compared to World War I. So it's much easier to, I guess, talk about it, right? It's the easiest storyline to talk about, and it was in the gigantic scale and much recently. So nobody really talks about World War I. That's why most of misconception comes from that. Before I started to react to history videos on this channel, basically, I didn't know much about World War I either. I learned so much while reacting. I watched so many World War I videos that after that, some of the things that if I look back on, right, that feels I guess like I had I don't want to say misconception, but I didn't know that, right? Sure, it's a misconception, why not? Like everybody normally who doesn't know about World War I would normally think that how Nazi Germany was, that's how World War I Germany was too, right? That there was not much of a difference. Even though Hitler wasn't there, so Germany's mentality was kind of like that, right? Before all the world wars were like that. That's what people usually think because they don't know much about World War I. That's the one misconception, like there is no Nazi Germany in World War I, right? So yeah, things like that. And then obviously I realized of Prussia, how Germany was formed. That is all crucial to understand things. All right, let's watch this one.
There's been a lot more coverage of the Second World War than the First, as most of you are no doubt aware. And we've noticed that probably because of that lack of coverage, people have a lot of misconceptions about the First World War, how and where it happened, and who was fighting it. And we're going to try to fix that today. I'm Indy Nidell. Welcome to a Great War special episode, the top 10 popular misconceptions about the war. Number 10, Russia was only a second-grade military power in the First World War. Not true. Russia may have left the war after the revolution, and certainly the Great Retreat and disasters like the Battle of Tannenberg don't exactly make the Russian military record shine. But the Russian army was anything but a pushover. At this time, 100 years ago, they were just romping through eastern Anatolia, and the Brusilov offensive and the innovative tactics it used came seriously close to knocking Austria out of the war, or even collapsing the entire Austro-Hungarian Empire. It certainly broke the back of their army. The enormous growth and modernization of the Russian military industry by 1916 was also nothing to sneeze at. Number 9. Everything has already been...
Yeah, I mean, Russian thing, obviously Germany was a powerhouse, right? But in the war, it's usually not which is number one, which is number two. It's always pros and cons, right? Which battle favors which thing. As an overall, if you're holding your own, right, you are as good as the number one. So it's not really number one, number two. Russia, pound for pound might not be as powerful as Germany, but Russia's numbers, their geographical advantage, their know-how of battlefield, every time in the history of Russia, every time somebody tried to invade or attack Russia, they always had some tactics, right, that only they can use, right, and everybody falls prey to that. So it's not really that Russia was number two or not, it's just pros and cons of both sides.
Said about the war. No. New stuff is being discovered all the time, like that Edith Cavell actually was spying for Britain, or that Falkenhayn's claim that the Battle of Verdun was to bleed France to death is quite likely an invention after the fact. Files are being declassified even now, 100 years after the war. Who knows what we're going to find out? Number 8, the Germans were the bad guys in the war. Really? Since they were the bad guys in World War II and wartime stories of the bloodthirsty Huns circulated in Allied media, they had to be the bad guys, right? And they got all the blame at Versailles in 1919. That has to count for something. Well, not so much. Was it Germany's fault that the whole house of cards came crashing down? That the war escalated into the horror that it did? Not so much more than anybody else in Europe, who all had
if anything, we know that kind of, it was a clusterfuck. Germany didn't want a global scale war to begin with. They just wanted Austria to be done with, I guess, their thing faster. So world has pity on them. Like, okay, Archduke got shot. Of course, they'd retaliate or something like that. Germany didn't want a global scale war. But of course, they're not going to back down from it. They were the scientific hub at the time. They were really a powerhouse. So in World War One, pointing out one thing, one country was an enemy, it's kind of weird. It's not the case. That's not how things work.
Outdated ideas about the necessity of the war and how to pursue it. And sure, you do have episodes like the rape of Belgium, but atrocities were committed by all sides.
Yeah.
The Armenian genocide and the massacres committed by the Russians in East Prussia in 1914 spring to mind. Just because...
So basically, it's not Germany. When it comes to evil, everybody's evil, right? Everybody has hand dipped in the evil soup, I guess.
Somebody is the enemy doesn't mean that they're the bad guy. Sometimes
everybody's
there
the
is
bad guy.
no bad guy. Sometimes everyone is the bad guy. Number 7, the war in the skies was a gentleman's war. The Flying Aces, like the Red Baron and Billy Bishop, they were the rock stars of the war, gliding above the carnage and fighting man to man chivalrously, except, again, not so much. They were fighting with machine guns, and they were most often flying in formations by the second half of the war, when the average life...
Air fighting is for the gentlemen. They pull aside each other and fight with swords. It's a machine gun. People shred each other basically by machine gun fire. There's a bullet hole in you while you're bleeding, your plane is crashing. That's not really gentlemanish.
Life expectancy of the pilots could be measured in hours. And never forget, the perfect kill happened when the enemy never saw you coming.
Yeah, there you go.
Number 6, World War I was a European war, and not a world war. Not true. It had its origins in Europe, and there was certainly a lot of the fighting done in Europe, but once the Ottoman Empire joined, you should have a clue how it would spread. Even before that, Japan fought against Germany. The United States and Brazil would eventually join the war. There were battles in the South Pacific and the South Atlantic. Soldiers from every continent, except Antarctica, would fight. And of course, there was fighting all over Africa, mainly by colonial overlords, but there were fronts in Persia, Mesopotamia, Libya, and even the borders of India. Definitely a world war here. Number 5.
It kind of is a European war because obviously Japan, Ottoman Empire, there are some countries who were power at the time who joined it, were not part of Europe and shit. But overall, Africa, India and other places joined in because it was European countries at the time. So it is a world war, obviously, but it's kind of also a European war. But again, around that time, European war meant world war because Europe controlled most of the world at the time, right? European colonies. That's why it's the word European colonies exist.
War was only fought in the trenches. The trenches are the symbol of World War I. And while they appeared on pretty much every front, the vast trench networks were only really common on the Western Front. In the deserts or the huge open spaces of the Eastern Front, cavalry played a bigger role, and huge trench systems would have been most often impossible to maintain. Number 4, tactics during the war didn't change. It's easy to think that, looking at the week-by-week carnage, how we cover it, but if you look at tactics in 1914 and those in 1918, it would be difficult to find many real similarities. The stalemate across the various fronts pretty much forced tactical innovation. Heck, the war saw the advent of mechanized mobile warfare, and certainly the techniques Hitler's Wehrmacht used at the beginning of World War II grew directly out of those used at the end of World War I. Number 3.
Obviously, there is no way in hell it's possible that tactics would not evolve. If tactics don't evolve, I think the same thing would happen what happened to Napoleon. I don't want to say Napoleon didn't evolve, but as a whole, he did not, right? At start, he was, I guess, a surprising force. Nobody predicted him, and he was fucking brilliant. By the end, of course, he kind of became a bit softer, let's just say, right? A bit paranoid and a bit more emperorish than general. But his tactics kind of remained the same, and everybody saw what the tactics are. And everybody just used that against him. It was, after that, it was just a crush. Obviously, Napoleon being Napoleon put on a fight that nobody can, but still. So yeah, tactics evolve usually during the war. You have to, because your enemy learns your tactics, then you can't just use that. Otherwise, either you die or you go on a stalemate. So you have to evolve.
Navies did not.
That is why all the basically tanks and many different type of equipment that we know of now were literally bred during the war. What is going on? People are coming up with this kind of equipment because they have to. There's nothing else left.
Real part in World War I? Well, the biggest battle in naval history, the Battle of
Wait a
Jutland
minute, I didn't hear that one.
of World War I. Number 3, navies did not play a real part in World War I. Well, the biggest battle in naval history, the Battle of Jutland, happened in World War I. Britain's Atlantic blockade of Germany was a big factor in depriving Germany of supplies. There were countless naval skirmishes all over the war. Germany tried to turn the tide of war with unrestricted U-boat warfare. And if you look at the Mediterranean, the major powers there were using their navies to block each other. There were also great stories of German raiders like the Möwe or the Emden, which you should definitely check out there. Number 2, the German army wasn't...
I mean, how did Germany, I guess, poke at USA if not for the naval warfare? That is how they poke at them, right? Sank US ships and shit like that.
Defeated in World War I. Yes, they were. They endured far longer than anyone could have imagined, and their final offensives in 1918 were real forces to be reckoned with. But the state of the army by the summer of 1918 was catastrophic in terms of supplies and morale. And the state of their allies was worse. Austria-Hungary never really recovered after 1916. The Ottoman Empire had huge problems even before the war, and the Bulgarian army collapsed. And the German army did call for a ceasefire before the Allies broke through the Hindenburg Line, which they would have done. Number 1, World War I was mainly fought on the Western Front.
It's perfect. After he said that, just pause. Like, are you kidding me? All right. The empires thing is fucking awesome, right? I mean, it just, made me think of how many empires fought in the World War I. And Ottoman is a clear picture, right? Ottoman, basically one guy forced entire Ottoman Empire, forced them to join the war and ally with Germany. One guy from Ottoman Empire, which is fucking ridiculous. That was their downfall because Ottomans were already losing badly against everybody at that point. And World War basically, was like, okay, that's it, done. After the war, war was finished, France, England basically banded together and just carved the shit out of the Ottoman Empire. And we have Middle East problem now.
There was the Eastern Front, the Serbian Front, the Italian Front, the Salonika Front, Gallipoli, the Persian Front, the Mesopotamian Front, the Palestine Front, the Libyan Front, the Caucasus Front, the Romanian Front, East Africa, Southwest Africa, Cameroon, the war at sea, the Arab Revolt. Did I miss anything? The Western Front was but a fraction, and not even a big fraction, of the total of the First World War. Okay, well, that is my list for now. Now, no doubt you have many things.
I mean, just because of trench warfare, right? It's just the, I guess, star of the war, let's just say. It's weird to say that it was a tragic, horrible thing where many people died, but fuck it, there you go. As war goes, it was a star of a war, right? That's the star of the entire lead actor, let's just say. Trench warfare. It was so fucking horrible with the gases, people living inside the trenches, the Christmas truce, all the ridiculous things happening around the time that basically everybody was just focusing on that because it was so surreal. But obviously, this is a global scale war. What happened in many different fronts, not just on the Western trench warfare. But yeah, that's the most talk about thing.
You disagree with, or many others you'd like to add to the list. Please let us know in the comments. And for anyone new to our channel, you can find over 200 videos about World War I on our channel. But if you're a bit overwhelmed with the selection, you can check out our 101 video right here.
Yeah. I love this channel so far. I haven't reacted to this Great War series for a long time now. I don't know when I did the last time, but I was doing week. I'll pick it up again, right? I'm still gonna finish it whenever. But yeah, this top 10 misconceptions, this was a good one. The biggest one is like, like I said, that, people assume World War I, oh, Nazi Germany. Everybody just intuitively said Nazi Germany. It wasn't Nazi, right? I mean, not everybody is basically, in tune with their historical facts, right? Not everybody knows their history, let's just say. So it's really hard for people to know that Germany was not Nazi in World War I, right? It was a Germany as a state, right? As a country, just like any other country. It was war of countries. There was no one singular evil like in World War II, right? So obviously there was atrocity. Some side had more atrocity than the other, but still as an overall factor, everybody was the bad guy and everybody was fighting each other for some stupid goal that everybody has been fighting for years and centuries now. World War II was a different war. One evil trying to do evil things. Even Napoleon was trying to just take over the world and rule it, right? Hitler's whole psychology were much racist and overall, I guess, one Aryan race or whatever. That the world has never seen something like that. So World War II was really different. But everybody just know World War II. Everybody know what it means about World War II, how Hitler was, what it means to have a singular enemy like this, like it's some movie or something. So everybody has that mentality. World War I must have been like that. It's not. Alright, well, if you like my next one, don't forget to like, subscribe, check out the next Sunday. There's a link in the description. Check out the cards, yeah. I'll see you next time.